Funding for Colores was provided in part by Frederick Hammersley Foundation. This time on Colores, screenwriter of the recent film Face of Love, Matthew McDuffie, shares what it's like to write for film and TV.
Everybody, everywhere, has an infinite story to tell. It's what makes us human, and it's what makes us love each other.
Lead actor James Corden and director David Frankel discuss their work on the film One Chance, the true story of an average man turned opera star.
He said, you know, this clip, it's just a clip on YouTube, has been watched by 100 million people, and it's unbelievably moving and emotional and poignant and beautiful.
A Museum of the City of New York exhibition peeks at upper crust society during the Gilded Age, a time mirrored in Downton Abbey.
There was an irony in a country that had been founded on egalitarian principles, now suddenly aping aristocratic modes.
Painter and Renaissance man Dougie Padilla explores the art of meditation.
I'm trying to create a place where the soul feels nurtured and where our sense of enchantment comes back into life, so that you walk in, you look at my paintings, you look at the work, you're in this place and you feel that once again that the world is in fact a magical place.
It's all ahead on Colores.
It's a responsibility to be a storyteller.
Screenwriter Matthew McDuffie shares the importance of story.
Why is story important?
Because it's everything, because everyone has one. As my son says, stories, they're everywhere. And it's interesting because my mother had this gift where she could see a couple on the street, and she would make up a story about them. She would go something like, "Oh, it's so tragic." Mm-hmm. You go, "Well, what's that, Mom?" "Well, she's in love with him," and she would go on. And it sort of made me realize that everybody, everywhere, has an infinite story to tell. It's what makes us human, and it's what makes us love each other. So that's why it's so important.
When you are creating characters, is that part of the process?
I just steal.
Just steal.
It actually, everything that I write sort of starts with some sort of autobiographical kernel. Story is really kind of like emotional mathematics, in that you're creating an algorithm that creates the response that you're looking for. I know that sounds cold-hearted, but it really is puzzle making. Well, particularly film writing.
Sure.
I mean, novel writing can be about observation, and certainly film is, but you want to have an emotional response from the audience, and that means setting things up in a particular way, so when a reveal is placed in front of the audience or in front of the characters, they can't help but react in the way that you hope.
When you're putting together a screenplay, what is the dramatic structure that you're looking for, and how do you create it, and why is it important?
It's important because that's how you get the reaction that you're looking for. The first thing to establish is a problem for the character, a reason for the story to exist, something that means a lot to that character. And then you sort of establish, what are they going to do about it? Because that's really where conflict and story comes from, is somebody wanting something and not being able to get it. So that sort of drives the story. That's what creates the scenes for you, is this need and obstacle that prevents the need. And then being a good dramatist is sort of like being a bit of a sadist, in that you want to take them as far from whatever they want as possible. You want to, yes, exactly. You want to torture them. And it doesn't matter if it's a comedy or a tragedy. You try to take them as far away from what they want as possible, to create that emotional thing. And that's sort of like, that's the crisis of the whole piece. And then it's like, okay, that acts as like a mousetrap in terms of the final confrontation of whatever the forces that you've developed in the beginning of the story that they're going to have to face at the end. And there's this purgation, I guess.
And that's our connection to it as an audience or as viewers, because it's such a natural part of the human condition.
I think everything has that structure. If you really think about that,
right.
It's the structure, and poetry probably has it as well. In that, it's like the structure of a wave on a beach, and there are lots of different types of waves, right? Big crashing waves or gentle waves that sort of lap upon the shore, but they all sort of rise to a place of absolute tension before they come tumbling down onto the sand or the rocks or whatever it is. And
so can you give us an example from your latest work of this moment we just discussed?
In The Face of Love, the film that came out with Annette Bening and Ed Harris, there is a moment where Annette Bening's character is holding a secret, and she's holding it from her daughter. So and I'm not ruining anything if I tell you this.
Okay.
Her husband has died 5 years ago, and she finds a man who looks just like him. So it's like a Hitchcock kind of romance. So she falls in love with his double and pursues him rather recklessly, and is keeping it a secret from her friends or neighbors or her daughter. Wow. And so there must, and I knew as soon as this sort of story came from, it actually came from the director of something his mother had experienced, I knew that daughter had to come into the story, that would be the crisis of this entire piece, that would be, the moment where there was the most tension in it, and that the mother would have to choose the lover over the daughter. And it was the emotional high point of the entire piece.
Why do you write?
I write because it is every art form that I adore. I write screenplays, I write films because it's every art form. It is poetry. When you're composing, it's poetry.
So tell us about the life of a screenwriter.
I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, but it is a solitary existence. It's something that you have to live in your head, and you have worlds in your head that you're devising, that you sort of have to, universes that are constantly sort of spinning, and you're sort of pulling them down out of the firmament onto an electronic page. So there is that you sort of feel, I want to say, separate from the rest of the world, because you sort of feel like you're an observer, and because you're constantly shopping for little bits of humanity to put in your cart every moment of the day. So your existence, your very existence, is your material. And if you think about that, there's never going, or should never be, a moment when you don't have something to write about. It's what you're choosing to write about. That's the difficult part.
Is that the burden of the writer, to make those decisions and then always have a decision after the decision you just made?
Burden / luxury.
Right.
Because there are such heavier burdens in the world than trying to decide what to compose. But the agony is quite real, because, and I think it's in relation to the desire that one has to put it out there. That compulsion to create, I think, is so profound that when you are not in that process, that it is torturous, because you feel like you are letting not just yourself down, but you're letting your potential down. You're letting the species down. You're letting the universe down. I guess that's the burden, because you feel like, I have something to say and I'm not getting it out there. I'm not letting people know what it's like. And I think that's really, because it's a responsibility to be a storyteller, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of like, are you alone? Are we alone? Are we, what's our connective tissue here? So I think that's really where the masochistic aspect of it is. You just don't feel like you're living up to your potential.
One Chance, a film about the true story of an average man turned opera star.
What is that?
Some
talent competition where the best performer in Britain gets £100,000.
Well, Robbie Williams is going to win that, isn't he?
Yeah, I think it's for amateurs, babe.
I fell in love with Paul Potts when I saw him audition for Britain's Got Talent the very first time, and became a very famous YouTube clip. I opened my email and there was this amazing link to a video that made me weep after 2 minutes, and it never occurred to me that would be a movie. And then a year later, I got the script on my desk. People go to the movie, they think, oh, I'm seeing a movie about a reality TV star. No, you're seeing a story about a man who was bullied as a kid, who faced all kinds of challenges, who ended up working in a cell phone shop in a tiny steel town in Wales, and who somehow still clung to his dream of being an opera singer. And one day, through the love of his wife, a wonderful woman who supported him through thick and thin, he achieved his dream. And that was quite moving to me and really inspiring. And I wanted to share the feeling I got watching that YouTube clip with audiences around the world.
I've never felt more nervous than I am today. Essentially, this is like a sports movie. It's like all the great sports movies that we love. It's essentially Rocky, really. It's just that instead of boxing or baseball or ice hockey, it's opera, you know, and that's the sport that he wants to do. And it's a classic underdog story of a guy who just refuses to give up, despite the fact that the world tells him that he should, you know. And yeah, that was the thing that I really, and I love the fact that it wasn't a film about a guy who wins Britain's Got Talent. It's a film about a boy who wants to be an opera singer. He just happens to reach his goal through that audition process. I think what I do have, more than anything, is an absolute respect for opera singers in the way that I had never really... it had been lost on me quite how much they have to protect their voices and their, you know, this instrument that's in them, and the lifestyle choices they have to make in order to pursue this career is quite astonishing, really.
Opera plays a big part in the movie for sure, but what I've seen from audiences who have seen the movie so far, you don't have to know anything about opera. You don't even have to like opera, or certainly not love opera, to enjoy opera. The more standard response is people say, gee, I hated opera before, or I didn't think much of opera before, and I fell in love with opera watching the movie, and I want to hear more. And that's really gratifying. That's the idea that we might inspire people to listen to opera, if not attend opera.
And that's what David Frankel, our director, said to me, really. He said, you know, this clip, it's just a clip on YouTube, has been watched by 100 million people, and it's unbelievably moving and emotional and poignant and beautiful. And imagine how great that would be if you'd seen for an hour and a half everything this guy had gone through to get there in his life. And that's what really sold the film to me, really. I loved working with him so much. I mean, I think this is a real labour of love for him. His dad always wanted to be an opera singer and didn't. He had to settle for being the editor of the New York Times. I think this story really spoke to him in that respect.
The world of Downton Abbey is a snapshot of the real-life opulence of the Gilded Age.
The Gilded Age is a term that has many interpretations. It's taken from a book that was published by Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner in the early 1870s called The Gilded Age. But at that time, it had to do with corruption and the fact that something gilded is only surface, has surface interest and surface value.
It's an age of tremendous wealth, an age of a certain amount of ostentation. But it's also a time when the country really matures and comes into its own from a financial standpoint, but also from a cultural standpoint.
I think that this new body of wealthy New Yorkers, these Fifth Avenue people, were interested in demonstrating that they were of the first order of New York society. And because many of them were nouveau riche, They were looking to establish their dominance in society by building these most impressive mansions, by wearing things that came from the great Parisian couture houses like Maison Worth, and by wearing jewelry that would be unquestionably of great value. Just on sight, you would say, this is what, this woman must have gobs of money. But it was a way of establishing themselves as this new American aristocracy, the first really of its kind.
Well, they oftentimes strove to express their wealth and their status, and that was a personal ostentation. But they also, in many ways, strove to make New York City, their city, a world-class city on a par with Paris and with London, and by extension to make America a world-class country on the world stage with France and with England. Families like the Vanderbilts are looking to Europe because Europe is still considered in the Western world the seat of civilization. It's a much older civilization. We're the new kid on the block, and so we tend to be imitating our betters in many ways.
There were these marvelous balls you've probably heard of. The great Vanderbilt Ball of 1883, which was sort of the opening salvo for this group of people, when everyone came and was seen and heard and lots was said about what everyone wore. Then there was the Bradley Martin Ball, which followed, and at that ball there was a concern that there was tremendous wealth being flaunted at a time when poverty was especially a struggle here in New York City. And after that ball, the Bradley Martins actually left the United States with their tail between their legs, a little bit, I think, ashamed of putting on so much of a celebration in the face of that situation economically. And then the last great ball was the James Hazen Hyde Ball, and the ball was so lavish, treated as a recreation of the court of Versailles, that people thought he was using company funds to hold the ball. So this is the trajectory of the balls, and in describing those, you see that in the beginning that wealth is flaunted and the public is very interested in it, but by the end the realization is that this is really too much, too far gone. They need to rein in some of that, especially in view of the rest of the world. They were just too separated from the rest of American society.
Many American commentators saw what was called an aristocracy of wealth, a kind of rebuttal against the principles on which the country was founded. We had been formed as an egalitarian country fighting against a British king, and therefore there was a disturbing irony to many people that at the end of the 19th century, the wealthy began to ape aristocratic principles by having one-of-a-kind dresses made, by wearing diamonds, by doing events which the decor looked like the court of Versailles. There was an irony in a country that had been founded on egalitarian principles, now suddenly aping aristocratic modes.
Painter and Renaissance man Dougie Padilla finds inspiration and inner peace.
It's important to me to make a difference in the world because I came out of the 60s. I think it's basically utopianism. I think when the Beatles sang "We Can Change the World," I bought it. I meditate, so I have the experience of one-pointedness, but I also let myself drift. A combination of focus and giving up control at the same time. And it's about the ability to walk between worlds, and there's a lot of different worlds to walk between. And this is sort of having one foot in this world and one foot in some other place, and I'm trying to sort of stretch between those two things and doing it with my hands by creating things. I am primarily a painter. I do a lot of drawing. I've got 85 journals / art books. I do printmaking. I do installations, ofrendas, and shrines. I do sculpture. I do a little bit of performance, but it's mostly for the gods. Why would I be working with a non-human audience? Well, gratitude. You know, it's also a little bit more like gardening, where you are acknowledging that you're only part of the process. I mean, nobody goes into a garden and goes, look at that tomato plant, I did that. But yet we get to the art world and artists have a rather large ego and they go, I did that. Well, maybe, you did part of it. I'm self-taught, I've never taken an art class. Unless you count the one in 7th grade where we learned to make enameled tie clips. A lot of what I do comes out of working in the building trades, carpentry and house painting, and I went to welding school and learned how to use my hands. And I love technical art, but that's just not my mode. I made a decision long ago that I just didn't want technique to stand between me and what I was up to. I have an iconology that I work with a lot. There's fish over and over again in my work. I grew up fishing. It's Minnesota. I have dreams about fish. I mean, why do we live in a world surrounded by cars, but we still dream about fish? I don't dream about cars, I dream about fish. I have skulls, but they're Day of the Dead skulls. They're not like goth skulls or heavy metal skulls. And my skulls are pink and lime green. Day of the Dead is a big deal for me, but why is it a big deal for me? Well, a connection to Mexico, this, that, and the other. But also it's because, you know, I'm getting older, mortality is an issue for me, and has been since I had my first heart failure at 20. It's an old tradition in Buddhism to meditate in the graveyards. So the whole dance with death, or whether you choose to not dance with death, is part of what determines your relationship with life. And so working with the skull icon and what happens if it's pink with big polka dots on it, does that allow me to face my mortality more? I'm not sure, but something's going on. Something's going on inside me where, heck, dying isn't the hard part. Living's more difficult. I've come close enough a number of times. I was raised in St. Louis Park with the Norwegian Lutheran side of the family. My father was half Mexican and half cowboy. I could sight read and sing Bach cantatas by the time I was 11 because of all the choir training I had. My mother was a music teacher. I mean, I didn't like it at the time because all I wanted to do was play center field like Willie Mays. I went away to college for a short, illustrious career where I seemed to major in fighting against the war in Vietnam, civil rights. Fall of '66, I went to where Allen Ginsberg was reading. And up till that time, I thought the Beats were phonies. And Allen Ginsberg blew my mind. Eventually came back to Minnesota where I studied with a Zen master here in town. Somewhere along the line, when I was about 30, I'd always been involved in music and writing, and then it shifted and I just woke up one day and I was a visual artist. That's kind of how I got here. I helped found and was on the board of Art-A-Whirl. I helped Robert Bly found the Minnesota Men's Retreats and that whole men's movement. Grupo Soap del Corazon is the Latino artist group that I co-founded with Javier Tavera that is now 12 years old. My latest is I've been thinking a lot about starting a museum. Why not? Meditating. Some days are horrible. your mind's filled with junk. You sit there and watch the junk, and other days you sit down and you just sail, and it's the same way in here. The other day I counted 37 projects that were laid out in the studio, but that didn't include the things that are in my notebooks and lists. I literally have written down projects for the next 30 years of my life, and they're all different. The ideas are so seductive. I try to write them all down and then just let go, because you just can't keep up with them. The thing that's hard for me is there's always new things to start. I'm trying to create a place where the soul feels nurtured and where our sense of enchantment comes back into life, so that you walk in, you look at my paintings, you look at the work, you're in this place and you feel that, once again, that the world is in fact a magical place.
Next time on Colores, social arts practitioner Naomi Natali of 1 Million Bones confronts the global issue of genocide.
You move forward with this understanding and this respect that if we belong to each other, then we're responsible to one another. And what does that responsibility mean?
Founder of Santa Fe's innovative Dancing Earth Creations, choreographer and dancer Rulon Tongan shares her vision.
I love that in dance you can become a snowstorm, you can become an ancient ancestor, you can become so many different things. You're not limited.
Photographer and alchemist Ian Reuter travels in a truck that is also his camera. Inspired by a 19th century photographic process, he shares his experience photographing New Mexico.
When we're shooting out in the elements, just a little bit of wind will shake the camera, and nature creates all the beauty, but it also gives us the most adversity and the most challenges.
Until next time, thank you for watching. Funding for Colores was provided in part by Frederick Hammersley Foundation.